Alright, tinoti makadiko mhuri yeZimbabwe kusangana kwatiri kuita zvakare ipo pano paZimu News update apo petinoda kupa mafirst hand update anonga ari kuitika munyika yedu yeZimbabwe. So tine mashoko etiri kutambira ari kunzi abva kuUnited Nation apo petiri kunzwa kuti United Nation yatageta mapresident matatu kuAfrica kuno, vanova vari president wenyika ino yeZimbabwe, koita president wenyika yeUganda napresident wenyika yeCameroon. Sezvo zvetiri kuona kuti United Nation inopindira kana paine zvinhu zviri kuvhiringidzwa, because tiri kuona kuti president wekuCameroon ane 93 years now, akaisa mwana wake kuti anga achiita vice president. Tiri kuona vaYoweri Museveni vane about 86 years, vakabva vaisa mwana wavo kuti anga achiita mukuru wemauto, akatanga kutaura zvinhu zvakasiyana siyana achituka anova ari opponent, big opponent yemuUganda anonzi Bobi Wine, achitoti baba vangu vapedza newe next election rako kupedzera futi, chinova chiri chiratidzo chinoratidza kuti zvinhu zvinomira zvakanaka. Yobva yanoma futi muno munyika yeZimbabwe. Tisikazozive kuti zvichazopera sei, sezvo zvatiri kuziva kuti United Nation ndo yakabvisa ana Joseph Kabila vanga vanetsa kunana DRC uko. So ngatisare tichinzwa nhauwa dzakafanana neidzi.
And as such that report is binding, and as such that report can be used to go to court and to basically indict the government and the processes it undertook. So we cannot take this process as having been free, fair, or voicing the people's opinions on this issue. Saga, she put the whole process into the bin. And so the fact is that the process has to be redone. The CAB cannot be pushed through by Parliament on the pretext that they've got sentiments of the people through the few people that were selectively chosen to speak and given the opportunity to speak. And so when you see a person being removed from their position after putting in such a report, which should be considered a good job done, because that is the purpose of her position, is to look at these human rights issues and to flag human rights violations so that government may be able to fix or address issues that could compromise human rights. And by her being removed just 4 days after giving out such a report, for me that smells of punishment, it smells of removal, and it smells of removal so that she does not have similar influence in being an oversight body on human rights issues in the country, especially pertaining to this process of CAB and any other processes that might come thereafter. And I think to remove her at this very important juncture of us looking at the safeguarding of our constitution, or at a juncture where there is an attempt to amend the constitution, illustrates an abuse of power. So when we look at intent without looking at just the legality, so that's why presidents have got to give rationale for removing people from key positions. They can't just do it just because it's their prerogative. They've got to do it within the bounds of reasonability, and there has to be a rationale for their decision. And I don't think there is any other rationale that a reasonable man can draw except the fact that she's being removed because she was critical and highlighted government's dereliction. And to a certain extent, you can say that what she has pointed out actually shows that the government of Zimbabwe has either been complicit in human rights violations in this particular instance, or it has decided not to protect citizens and people from human rights abuses or human rights violations, which, according to the International Court of Justice's own manual on redress and reparations for human rights violations, is a human rights violation. The failure to protect civilians or people from human rights abuse or human rights violations is in itself a human rights violation for which a government can be charged and for which a government can be forced to pay reparations.
Right. Yeah. You know, there was there's a YouTube video. I don't know if folks have seen that from You know this professor, what's his name? Is it Lumumba? You know,
Yeah, it looked like it looked AI. I don't know if it was real.
or is it?
I wasn't too sure about it because the person speaking, what was being spoken, sounded a bit like his voice, but not entirely. I thought it was an AI recording. I wasn't really too sure, and then it was superimposed on something he said or spoke
R-
um, some other time before.
Right. Because somebody sent it to me, and I was like, okay, what what? Because there was a picture in the corner, and then there was him, as if he was speaking, saying whatever it is that he was saying. But I was because when I looked at it, I just wanted to point to I'm not saying that you are doubting that it is authentic, but I wanted to point out to the international attention that this thing might be getting right now, because there was a report on BBC, which they tried to shoot down. I don't know, there's an account that is running under the name, is it Bete or something like that, and I know the person who's behind that account, but they tried to shoot that down, as if they gave a one-sided narrative, which is the same thing now that people who are saying the reassignment of JC was a good idea, because the report that she gave was a one-sided, take on what happened. And given all these things that are going on, and the way that this has happened, remembering that Emerson Mnangagwa himself, he said he wasn't going to be seeking anything. 2028, he goes home. He goes to his farm. He does, farming. And there was even a question on persuaders. Say, I'm going to persuade the persuaders not to persuade me, etc. And then he makes, such a move. What does it say and mean about his involvement in this whole thing as the president?
Look, over the past week, I have decided not to just talk about the CAB 3 process,
Mhm.
but I've decided to go and look at the ZANU PF constitution itself to see whether what they are trying to do with CAB has been approved by ZANU PF constitution and the processes and systems thereof.
Mhm.
Hence, I have gone to look, and some of these things, Justice Mahoney, who's here, has been instrumental in pointing out some of these loopholes, which forced me now to go and read the ZANU PF constitution. The president is being said that ZANU PF want him to go for up until 2030. And this was supposedly a resolution reached by ZANU PF. But the problem is that that resolution was reached at conference, but it has not been enunciated by what? By Congress. Yet, the Central Committee of ZANU PF is only allowed to implement to policies, programs, and also decisions made by Congress. There is no way within the constitution of ZANU PF that says that they can implement or push policies made by conference. They can only push policies that have been enunciated by Congress. And then, in number three, that very same central committee is supposed to then take policies and decisions off the Congress, and they are supposed to push them into central government. And they're supposed to oversee that they are pushed through central government. So it is clear that CAB 3 has been pushed through from the central committee, which only is supposed to take its mandate from Congress, and there has been no Congress. So therefore, the decision to extend Emerson Mnangagwa's term to 2030 through central government by changing the constitution has not been put through properly within ZANU-PF itself. Number two, Emerson Mnangagwa, who's being said he must go through to 2030, has not been re-elected in a conference by ZANU-PF. And from our understanding, there is 2 terms for a president in our constitution. There's also 2 terms, according to the ZANU-PF constitution, that a president is supposed to run, because there's supposed to be concurrency and there's supposed to be a relationship between the ZANU-PF constitution and the national constitution. And so right now, they are saying President Mnangagwa must go until 2030, but yet he has not been elected in the conference that is supposed to happen next year in 2027 for him to be eligible to be put through by the party as its candidate for presidency. But how do they know that Emerson Mnangagwa will be given that extension in ZANU-PF? How have they chosen to put him forward for 2030 when he hasn't yet been selected at a conference of ZANU-PF, where he could easily be challenged and where they could deny him the continuation of his presidency? Additionally, the Central Committee that has been pushing through this amendment that came from conference and not from Congress, meaning that they've pushed through something that is not legally ratified by ZANU-PF, has co-opted people into the Central Committee who have not been elected at Congress. But yet Congress is the only body that can elect members of the Central Committee. So there's already a lot of illegalities within ZANU-PF and not following of the constitution of ZANU-PF that has seen them pushing through decisions that are not legally ratified or that have not been properly constituted in ZANU-PF because they are not coming from Congress. And these have been pushed through by the Central Committee to become government policy. And now there is an attempt to change the constitution from a policy that has not been properly instituted in ZANU-PF itself. So there is an abuse of power through and through. There is an abuse of process through and through. And there's an ignoring of the constitution internally in ZANU-PF, and that is important for us because that constitution of ZANU-PF, the policies that come from ZANU-PF, the programs that come from ZANU-PF are then pushed into national government by the Central Committee. So therefore, ZANU-PF policies become national policy at some point or the other. And that's why now you're seeing that there is a disconnection. Every day you are hearing Temba Mliswa talking about how it is that people are not defending the president, they are not fighting for CAB 3, they are not doing anything. He's now an outsider trying to take issue with the people in ZANU-PF for not pushing and advancing CAB 3 that their Congress or the people never accepted or never asked for. So there is a clear indication that ZANU-PF is no longer the one that is running the country. But there is a small elite and a small cabal that do not take their instructions from the people, because ZANU-PF says that it is the people that lead through Congress. So those people are no longer leading to Congress, but they are now an elite that was put into Central Committee without following processes. That elite has got an external cabinet that meets with the president every day at 7 o'clock at the president's private offices, and they are making decisions alone. And these decisions are now the ones that you are seeing that are arbitrarily doing things like ignoring the constitution, human rights violations, arresting people, meeting to discuss what Rutendo said and potentially eliminating Rutendo, and so forth and so on. So it has become a pattern, and a pattern that illustrates an arbitrariness of a few individuals who lack experience, who lack a bigger body of decision making that could moderate decisions that are making rash decisions, which include reappointment of key positions because of the fact that those key positions have carried out their jobs to the T, and they're carrying out of their jobs to the T
Yeah,
does not suit.
on that one day, I saw you, talking about, the DG's, removal and saying that, the rumor is that he refused to be forced into something that he did not, believe in, like to use, the CIO to go after those that were against, CAB. Can you talk to me? Can you talk to me more about, that? What's, you are giving, this presentation of yours?
Yeah, so I had already heard that the DG was going to be removed in December already from some of the key people who sit in this new or parallel cabinet that I'm talking about that meets
Yes.
every 7 o'clock with the president on a daily basis
Every
after work,
day.
every day. So if you go to some of these guys, you can go and visit these people. I remember once when Geza was really giving them a tough time, I was called to Harare. And I was summoned on the basis, why are you quiet
Okay.
about Geza? And I said, I'm not interested in the Geza issue. And I believe that dealing with this Geza issue comes with threats. And they were like, no, please come to Harare. And they gave me money. And this is where this is where the talk of a vehicle comes from. I was already using a vehicle, and so I was offered a Land Cruiser to speak about Gaza. So I said, but I don't want to speak about Gaza. This thing is dangerous. And honestly speaking, I didn't necessarily feel that everything that Gaza was saying was entirely wrong. But I was being coerced. So I was then asked to come. I was then asked to come, and when I got there at 6 o'clock. My flight got there at about 6 o'clock. Went through to the offices, and so we couldn't talk with the people at the office because soon after they had to leave to go to this meeting, which they go every day at about the same time.
All right.
So within this visit, I was then told that no, the DG is going. And I asked,
Ah,
why is the DG going? And you need to understand, let me build context before I talk about the second DG.
right.
The first DG, Moyo, when Moyo came in, Moyo had an intelligence report that was very scathing of the so-called, I don't like to use the word Rigananda, but let's use it because we understand who's being talked about. And he had earmarked or targeted certain of those Gananda to be arrested. Now, how do I know this? Remember, DG Moyo tried to recruit me. And within trying to recruit me, DG Moyo had people that he sent through to try and undertake the recruitment. Those people are known to me, they're still friends to me today. These are also the same people that when our monies were not coming through to pay lawyers in South Africa, were invited to the meeting by DG Moyo as people who know me and had to sit in the meeting. So outside, they're the ones that give me information in the inside. And also, even Temba Mliswa has already also told me, in fact, this one, Temba Mliswa told me that when DG Moyo came in, he had a dossier to arrest one of the most important and prominent Riganand. And that report was taken and given to the president, and there was already an arrest warrant that had been prepared. But the president then decided to ask DG Moyo not to do it. And he differed with them on a number of issues. Processes and systems during elections, the way that the opposition was being dealt with. He did not believe in using violence. He believed in using other techniques. He believed in sitting with the opposition, talking to the opposition, and that did not sit well inside. They believed in using the power of intelligence to control the opposition and to eliminate threats within the opposition. DG Moyo did not believe that because he was a diplomat at heart. I understand that this one who replaced DG Moyo was supposed to come in and do what it is that DG Moyo was not willing to do. And Mangwanya did not do that. And he also was not in good books with some of these people who are said to be a parallel government. He did not subscribe to that. And when asked to use this intelligence organization to clamp down on those who are not supporting this bill, he was then taken out. For instance, last 2 weeks ago, when I began to speak, Mangwanya reached out through one of his agents. They said that the DG wanted us to meet, and he wanted us to discuss what we need to do to stop all this noise, this mudslinging on social media, and for me to stick to what I usually do, which is talking about the Good Zimbabwe story. And he said he had been given an instruction by his boss, which is Mangwanya, for me to come through. I refused because I knew that within the intelligence, Mangwanya was making decisions that were being second guessed by another lady who's a DDG there. This is why you see Mozambi was arrested. Yet Mozambi was brought into the country on the understanding through Mangwanya that there was a negotiation process that would take place between him and the president, and he would not be arrested. But when Muzembe came in, that decision was Mangwanya's decision and Mangwanya's assurances were then betrayed. So it's that duplicity, it's that double-facedness, it's this lying and not keeping to promises and abusing this institution for the purposes of serving this elite parallel cabinet that Mangwanya was not happy to do. And that is also what put him in trouble. And that's why he's been fired. But for a president to fire the head of intelligence, two heads of intelligence in a period of 2 years, that in its own respect is very, 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 very concerning. It shows instability. It wears down the moral of the morale of the intelligence officers. It keeps changing the intelligence strategy. When you read Bonyongwe's book, he spells out what it took to build this intelligence and to put the ethos that was in this intelligence organization and to professionalize it by emulating a number of intelligence agencies across the world. That is now beginning to fall apart. Hence, you see that our intelligence system has become weaker, and people are punished within the intelligence now for writing reports that are honest and critical. Mangwanya is said to have given the government a report that says that this CAP 3 is a risk, it's a national security risk potentially, and this parallel cabinet that continues to break the rules and continues to benefit a few people is also a national security threat, which is what DG Moyo was also saying, but both have been ignored. Now you look at this in line with the removal of JSE. Jessie is not an appointee of an NGO. She's not an appointee of a US human rights assessment institution. She's not a member of Amnesty International. She's a member of a Chapter 12 institution created by our government through the Constitution in order to be an oversight body on human rights issues. The fact that she was fired for giving a critical report to this process is an indictment on the government. But the fact that it happens on the same day with the intelligence head who is refusing to be used by parallel structures that are not constitutional and that are not legal, and is refusing to do the dirty work and to abuse people and to violate human rights is really, really, really an indictment. But it also shows that the administration is really, 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 really under pressure. And it's beginning to make questionable decisions and mistakes in its decisions. But before I finish, what is going to be an indictment for them is that report given by JSE is official. It cannot be erased. It's coming from internally. It cannot be dismissed as a document from the imperialists or a document of regime change. But it is seen as a proper appraisal and indictment of the Zimbabwean government and how it treats its people in processes of democracy.
Right. Thank you very much, for that. Let me pause, right there and